Oh my God. I just found a pile of bones right in front of me.
No way.
From devoured flesh to a man vanishing in thin air, this Bigfoot hunt went way off track. What started as a science-based search in the Alaskan wilderness turned into something far more chilling. What did Bryce Johnson and his team really walk into? The clues led north, and so did the fear. It all started with bits and pieces, unsettling remains, torn-up gear, and whispers of a wolf that shouldn't exist. But the deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't just about a rare animal. Something much darker was hiding in the forests of Alaska. After uncovering strange evidence in California pointing to a rare type of wolf known only from the southeastern corner of Alaska, the Expedition Bigfoot team followed that trail all the way up to Prince of Wales Island. And that's where everything changed. What was supposed to be a scientific investigation slowly turned into something that felt more like a warning. From the moment Bryce Johnson and Maria set foot on the island, the tone was different. The air felt heavier. Locals avoided eye contact, and those who did speak kept their voices low. The stories weren't about Bigfoot sightings anymore. They were about people who never came back.
How's it going? Sorry to interrupt. I'm researching the topic of Bigfoot.
There were reports of piercing screams echoing through the night, tales of hunters vanishing without a trace. And then, a recent event had shaken the town so badly that entire families packed up and left. Town meetings were called. Panic spread. Some locals decided they'd had enough, and they just disappeared, not into the woods, but off the island completely. A witness comes forward. Out of nearly 20 people Maria and Bryce approached, most were too scared to speak. Cameras were turned away. Stories were cut short. But then, one man agreed to talk. As long as his face wasn't shown, he was a logger, experienced, tough, someone used to working long hours in deep forests. But even he admitted, something out there had rattled him in a way he couldn't explain. His crew had been logging far from any roads, about 30 miles from the closest town. That meant no quick escape, no backup. If something went wrong, they were on their own. And it did go wrong. He explained that just 2 weeks earlier, while working with a crew of around 20, they began noticing odd things. Tools and equipment vanished. At first, they assumed it was human error, but then they'd find the missing gear placed neatly, right at the edge of the forest. When Maria asked whether a bear might have been responsible, the logger shook his head.
2 weeks ago, we were all working out here. There was at least 20 guys, and we just started noticing things were moved.
Really?
We'd find things just gone, and then we'd go looking for them and find them down on the edge of the wood.
There were no signs, no claw marks, no footprints, nothing. It was like the tools had moved on their own. And that was just the beginning. The screams got closer every night. Not long after, the noises started. At first, they were faint, coming from deep in the woods. But they weren't regular animal sounds. The logger described it as a kind of cry, something in distress, something that sounded wrong. The closest comparison he could give? A woman being attacked. Each night the sounds returned. Each time, they were louder, closer. The logging crew had been staying near a pile of tree trunks they'd cut earlier in the season. That's where Maria and Bryce met the man, right at the site where everything had gone downhill. The logger explained that even though the screams began far away, it felt like whatever was making them was getting bolder, creeping toward their camp a little more each night. The fear among the locals wasn't just paranoia, it was survival instinct. People were packing up and leaving their homes, and those who stayed didn't feel safe. The logger said his crew felt like sitting ducks. There was no way to defend themselves from something they couldn't even see. When asked if they thought it was Bigfoot, the logger didn't hesitate. He didn't call it a legend. He said it like it was fact. People, he claimed, disappeared out there. And whatever was taking them wasn't human. A warning from the mountains. He told Bryce and Maria that these beings, whatever they were, lived in the mountains, deep in the wilderness, in areas no one dared to explore. And when asked if he'd ever gone up there himself, his answer was short. Never. That wasn't their land. It belonged to them. Old-timers in the town said the same. They knew those mountains weren't meant for humans. Something else had claimed them long ago. As the conversation ended, the logger left them with one final warning. If you're not from here, you don't belong out there. Stay as far away as you can. Despite the very clear warning, Bryce and Maria were locked in. To them, this island wasn't just another patch of forest. It was the place, the most target-rich environment for Bigfoot sightings they had ever come across. Locals didn't just talk about strange noises or weird shadows. They were genuinely afraid. The focus was a remote mountain area that had been at the center of several chilling reports. As the team flew out toward their target zone, Russell, a key member of the team, filled them in on Native American legends tied to that area. These weren't just your average folklore tales. He spoke of an aggressive, supernatural humanoid being said to roam those woods. Something worse than Bigfoot, something meaner.
We're gonna touch down in that lake, right there. Pilots just gotta get into position.
With that kind of background, the team knew they had to stay sharp. Bigfoot wasn't the only possible threat out there. Bears and wolves were also in the mix, adding another level of danger to their already risky mission. Still, the team believed they were ready for anything, or at least they thought they were. Into the unknown. Using the latest tech, including drones, they began their search. Right off the bat, the drones picked up something strange. Scents, and not the kind you'd expect. There was the smell of rotting flesh, wet dog, and just something off. These weren't normal smells, but they also didn't perfectly match what they were looking for. Then the equipment narrowed it down. 2 possible locations for a Bigfoot encounter. To move faster, the team split up. Maria took the lower altitude route. Russell headed up the mountain. That's when the real weirdness started. It began with a scream, then bones. Later that night, while trying to take shelter from a storm, Russell and his group heard something strange, loud rustling, and it was getting closer. There was that same awful smell again, the one locals had warned them about. The woods were pitch black, visibility almost zero. Russell grabbed his flashlight, heart racing. He needed to see what was making that awful noise. Everyone was on edge. They pushed forward into the darkness, and what they found was the stuff of nightmares. Flesh, pieces of skin, hanging in the trees, torn, devoured, fresh. Before they could even take it all in, the rustling came back. Something massive was moving through the trees nearby. They bolted after it, trying to get a glimpse. Along the way, they found broken branches, recently snapped. Russell knew right then they were on the creature's trail.
Look, do you see that? Come on.
But just as fast as it had appeared, it was gone. The rustling stopped. The woods went quiet. And on the lower side of the mountain, things were about to get even creepier. The dark discovery. As Maria continued her search, she encountered the same foul smell that Russell had described earlier. But this time, something even stranger caught her attention. Bones, a whole pile of them. The sight made her heart race. For a moment, she was convinced she'd just come across Bigfoot's remains. But as she got closer, the pieces started to fall into place. This wasn't a body. This was a kill site. The same type of discovery they'd made in Washington during a previous investigation. This was a place where something had been hunted, and it wasn't just any predator. Maria quickly radioed Russell, panic creeping into her voice. "Oh my God! I just found a pile of bones right in front of me. A couple of skulls and other bits," she reported, her voice shaking. She wasn't alone for long. As she examined the site further, her equipment started acting up. Her laser-guided technology, which should have been pinpoint accurate, began flashing random readings. A strong signal appeared. Something was nearby. Something big. Something they couldn't see. A sense of unease filled the air.
Whatever we're seeing is constant. There's something out there.
The team could feel it. This wasn't just an animal. This was something much smarter. Something that was aware of them, possibly watching them from the shadows. The strong, foul odor began to creep closer again, but then it disappeared just as suddenly. And with it, the readings on the scanner returned to normal. This left them with a chilling realization. They were being toyed with. They were being stalked by something intelligent, something that had the upper hand. The team was on edge, unsure of what to do next. They had already felt like prey, but now It was as if they were being hunted in their own game. As they stood together trying to make sense of the situation, another scream echoed through the woods. It sounded almost human, and it was close. "What was that? What the hell?" Bryce whispered, his voice barely audible over the tension. This wasn't the usual noise of a wolf or bear. This scream had an unsettling, human-like quality to it. It came from multiple directions, disorienting them. But the most persistent sound seemed to be coming from near the water. Suddenly, a rustling noise came from above. The group froze, their hearts pounding in their chests, only to have it stop just as quickly. They were now certain. This wasn't a wolf. This wasn't a bear. The voices they were hearing, they didn't belong to an animal at all. It sounded like a person in distress. The second scream they heard was even eerier. It had a human-like tone, the kind of scream you'd hear in a nightmare. It matched exactly what the logger had warned them about, an unnerving, almost human cry that chilled them to their core.
What the? That's not a wolf.
Russell gathered his crew. "Stay alert. Watch out for anything," he commanded. This wasn't just about Bigfoot anymore. They were way past that point. The area they were in had been abandoned by loggers for a reason. Something had made them fear for their lives. And now they were venturing deeper into those same woods. As they moved through the thick forest, the only light coming from their flashlights, the screams continued. And that strange, lingering odor? It never left. The team couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into the very heart of danger. Maria suggested they move toward the lake, where the scream had seemed to originate. They walked for over 2 miles, the air growing heavier with every step. Meanwhile, Russell had his own discovery to make. He returned to the spot where they had found animal skin hanging from the trees earlier. This time, when he arrived, he found something even more disturbing. The piece of flesh was gone. It wasn't on the ground. It wasn't in the trees. It was simply gone. The piece of flesh they had seen hanging from the tree was now nowhere to be found. Using the images captured by the cameraman, the team estimated the distance from the ground to where the flesh had been, about 20 feet up. Russell, with his experience, knew immediately that there was no way a bear could have removed the flesh without breaking the branches as it climbed. Whatever had done this had the ability to maneuver high up in the trees. Analyzing the situation critically, Russell came to a chilling conclusion. They had been outsmarted. The creature had taken the flesh after they had chased it, retreating to avoid being seen by the crew. The creature was stealthy, able to move like a shadow, carefully avoiding the direct light of their flashlights. It was as if it had been leading them away from the spot, luring them so it could return and retrieve the piece of flesh. Russell, in disbelief, admitted that whatever they were dealing with was always one step ahead. But this wasn't the only unsettling thought. One of the crew members, Zach, confessed that he had the distinct feeling of being watched, a sense of unease that made everyone feel unsafe in the area. The following day, they decided to look for physical evidence. The rain from the previous night had softened the ground, making it ideal for tracking. The team hoped to find footprints, maybe something that could give them a clue as to what they were dealing with. But things didn't go as smoothly as they had hoped. While they did spot numerous bear tracks, there was nothing that resembled Bigfoot footprints. Zach, who was knowledgeable about wildlife, explained that the bear tracks were likely from bears that had been moving around in search of food after the rain, eager to eat the new growth. He reassured them that they were safe during the day, despite the ominous presence of the previous night's terror. However, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that this research trip felt different, more dangerous. For the first time, they had armed guards accompanying them. She reflected on past expeditions, where they had ventured into bear territories like Alaska, but this felt much more threatening. The bears here were bigger, wilder, and less accustomed to humans. They were unpredictable and could attack at any moment. The presence of armed guards added to the sense of tension in the air. Maria couldn't help but notice how unsettling it was to have that added layer of security, something they had never needed on any previous expedition. It felt as though they were walking on the edge, constantly aware of the risks surrounding them. The team had ventured into bear country before, but this felt different, more intense, more dangerous. The looming threat of something far bigger than any bear made the team uneasy. Whatever creature had taken the piece of flesh wasn't just a predator. It was intelligent, strategic, and seemingly untouchable. The shadows they walked through were no longer just trees and rocks. They felt like they were being stalked by something, or worse, toyed with. The air was thick with a sense of dread, and every rustle in the trees, every snap of a twig, sent their hearts into overdrive. As they continued their search, the realization set in. Whatever was out there, it was playing a very different game, and they were the prey. As the day progressed, the danger became even more apparent. Since it was morning, the bears were now emerging from their dens, ready for an active day. Zach, ever the expert, warned the team that the bears would be hungry and on high alert, making any encounter with them potentially deadly. The constant tension in the air made it clear that this was no ordinary expedition. It felt more like a high-stakes survival situation. The presence of armed guards, a first for this group, was both reassuring and unsettling. Although they stood behind the scenes, watching and ensuring the team's safety, the guards were a constant reminder of the danger they were in. Their guns weren't enough to guarantee survival against more than just bears. The thought of facing a group of massive humanoid creatures hunting for human flesh seemed to haunt their every move. While many Bigfoot encounters are innocent enough, some are violent and terrifying, especially when these creatures feel their territory is being invaded. The ghost town of Portlock. The dark and twisted history surrounding Portlock, a ghost town in Alaska, echoed in the back of their minds. This village, once a thriving settlement, had been abandoned not once, but 4 times due to strange and terrifying events. Disappearances and gruesome deaths plagued the area, with whispers of a mysterious humanoid creature said to be the cause. The fear surrounding this entity grew so intense that an entire Alaskan village was left to rot away, its buildings crumbling into the wilderness. But what made Portlock so chilling?
Portlock was cursed and Bigfoot's place and nobody goes there.
Overnight, everybody left.
On the surface, the village by the sea seemed peaceful, a quiet corner of the world. However, its past was far from ordinary. Over the years, people had attempted to settle there, only to flee in terror after experiencing unexplained phenomena. The village wasn't just abandoned due to physical sickness, it was the overwhelming fear, the eerie presence that weighed down on anyone who stayed for too long. Even the strongest individuals couldn't escape the dread that hung over Portlock. Explorers and native tribes that ventured into the area were gripped by terror, unable to ignore the haunting sense that something was always watching, as if the very land was cursed. The situation grew even more disturbing in 1867 when a group of nomadic Sugpiaq natives decided to settle in Portlock. They found the area rich with resources, clams, fish, and moose, and for a moment, it seemed like a dream come true. It felt like the perfect place to start fresh, a bountiful land that could provide for them. But, as with every other attempt to live there, the peace didn't last long. The horrors that would unfold were enough to cement Portlock's place in Alaskan folklore as a place of evil, forever cursed, forever abandoned. In just a matter of weeks, the Sugpiaq natives' hopes of settling in Portlock were shattered. Violent attacks began, but these weren't the typical raids from rival tribes. The villagers soon realized their attackers were something far worse: cannibal giants. These enormous, ferocious beings didn't come for food or livestock, they came for human flesh. Night after night, they launched brutal attacks, tearing through the settlement with unimaginable savagery. The villagers fought back with everything they had, determined to protect their homes. But the cannibal giants proved too much. The attacks were relentless, and eventually the residents had no choice but to abandon their land, fleeing for their lives. Yet, the nightmare didn't end there. The mysterious disappearance of Andrew Kamluck. Fast forward to 1930, and Portlock had expanded, and with it, the residents' sense of security. The once strictly enforced rules about avoiding the foggy, mysterious parts of the forest were gradually relaxed. But in 1931, one logger, Andrew Kamluck, ventured deeper into the woods, ignoring the long-standing warnings. When he didn't return, his friends set out to find him. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the town. Camluck's body was found in a horrifically gruesome state. His head had been crushed by his own sled. A sled so heavy no human could have moved it alone. Nearby, his sled dogs were found shredded, and the sled itself had been tossed far from the scene, as if thrown by an unearthly force. The brutality of the attack left the search party speechless, and the chilling question lingered. What kind of creature could possess such strength and savagery? Camluck's death was a stark reminder that something far more dangerous than the natural world lurked in the forest. The fear gripping Portlock only deepened with another terrifying incident. Tom Larson, a local resident, ventured out to the shore to chop wood for fish traps. As he worked, something caught his eye. A massive, hairy creature standing upright on the beach. It was too large, too animalistic to be human, yet its eyes radiated an unsettling intelligence. Overcome by a strange compulsion, Larson hurried home to grab his rifle, determined to protect himself. But when he returned to the beach and aimed at the creature, something inexplicable happened. He froze. He couldn't pull the trigger. The creature's eyes locked with his, and for a moment, the two stood in a silent, tense standoff. Then, the creature slowly retreated into the forest, leaving Larson shaken and deeply unnerved. Though the encounter ended without violence, it solidified the residents' fears. The creature wasn't just a myth or a legend. It was real, and it was growing bolder. A predator awakes. The creature, known by the locals as the Nantinaq, was no longer content to remain hidden in the forests. It began to target humans directly, moving closer to the heart of Portlock. The once thriving village was now at the mercy of a predator whose power and presence could no longer be ignored. Camluck's death seemed to awaken something primal within the creature, an unrelenting, vengeful instinct. More residents began to disappear, and fear swept through the town. Whispers spread about the Nantinaq, with some describing it as a vengeful spirit, relentless and unforgiving, like a tiger seeking revenge on hunters or an elephant punishing those who had wronged it. The creature, they believed, was no different, filled with wrath and waiting for the right moment to strike. Disappearance and death. At first, when a few gold miners went missing, the townsfolk thought they had simply gone on long expeditions. But as more people began to disappear, hunters, residents, doubts crept in. The unsettling pattern couldn't be ignored any longer. With each new disappearance, it felt as though the predator was inching closer and closer to the heart of Portlock. Soon, the grim truth became undeniable. Bodies began to surface, each one more gruesome than the last. Some were found in the bay, their bodies marked with deep claw and bite wounds. Others were discovered along trails or rivers, their remains so mangled they were nearly unrecognizable. Whatever was stalking Portlock, it had an insatiable hunger, and its attacks were growing bolder. The residents could no longer deny the presence of the creature, and Portlock, once a thriving settlement, now stood at the mercy of an unstoppable, horrifying force.